Let's talk online dating app matches for a moment, because this is a conversation that has been completely poisoned by the extremes, if you ask me. On one side, we've got the apps are rigged, women are horrible, only the chats win type of crowd, and on the other side, we've got the you just need to improve your profile and work on your self advice, which sounds great, but it explains almost nothing. I think the truth sits somewhere in the middle, and I think it's less dramatic than we see online. Not getting matches does not automatically mean that your profile sucks. While that might be the case, but that doesn't automatically mean that it is the case. It also doesn't really mean that you're unattractive or that you're doing something wrong entirely. Often, it just means you're running into structural issues that a lot of men almost never talk about because they're boring and well, not very rage inducing, if you will. So, I want to walk you through some real reasons men don't get matches that really have nothing to do with being, quote unquote, high value or optimizing your personality or faking a lifestyle online. So, let's dive into it. First of all, location quietly decides everything. This is by far the least sexy reason, and probably the most important one if you ask me. Dating apps are not evenly populated. They work best in dense, young urban areas where a lot of people are actively dating at the same time. That makes a lot of sense. If you're living in a smaller town or, a rural area or even a mid-sized city where most people your age are already paired up or not a lot of people are available on the dating apps, your match rate will be low no matter who you are. And I run into these same issues. When I'm in a big city, I get a lot of matches. And, when I'm in my own city, I get, well, fewer matches because there aren't a lot of people in my area. And that's not personal, that's just math. A man in a city with hundreds of thousands of active users is playing a completely different ballgame than a man in a town where the app refreshes the same profiles basically every week. And yet we compare ourselves across those environments as if it is the same system. It's not. It's not the same thing at all. Low matches often mean low exposure, not necessarily low desirability. Remember that. And if you don't factor geography into the equation, you'll end up blaming yourself for something that, well, really is not under your control to begin with. So keep that in mind. Location is super important. Second of all, the timing. Timing matters more than attractiveness. And I think it's it's massively underestimated, really. People don't use dating apps consistently throughout the year. Match rates fluctuate depending on the season, holidays, whether there is a period where a lot of people have breakups or general life phases. It just happens that is life, and you'll run into these issues. There are periods when people are genuinely open to dating, and there are periods when they're just browsing, killing time, or looking for validation. If you're active during one of those low intent periods, then your results will look terrible, even if nothing about you has changed. Same person, same profile, same app, completely different outcomes depending on timing. Men personalize this way too quickly. They'll assume that low matches mean rejection. Not necessarily. When, well, often it just means that the people or the women they're seeing aren't actually in a place to date and not necessarily swiping yes on you. And apps don't tell you that. They just keep showing you, the pretty faces. And let me give you a personal example. During the summer period in my area, I get very few matches. And it makes sense. A lot of people are on vacation. So I'm already in a location or in an area where there aren't a lot of women. And during summertime, when those women are on vacation, then it becomes even lower. So I get very few matches. However, starting October, I get a lot of matches. Well, why? Because you know what it is. It's cuffing season. People start to think, oh my God, it's the holiday season, Christmas time and all that stuff. And I don't want to spend those days alone. For me personally, that's the period where I get a lot of matches. So, yeah, there you go. During the year, it's low to okay. But, closing the year, I get more and more matches every week. So it is important. And third, your age range puts you in a bad comparison bracket as well. This is one that is uncomfortable, but it really matters. When you choose an age range on a dating app, you're not just choosing who you see, but you're also choosing who you're being compared against. If you're a man in his late 30s or early 40s swiping on women in their late 20s or early 30s, you're often being compared to men who are playing a completely different game. Men who are optimized for short term appeal, for instance, younger men who aren't signaling commitment, men who are just there to be, fun and unburdened. That doesn't mean that women don't want something serious. I'm not saying that, not at all. It means the app doesn't separate intent very well. So if you end up losing early comparisons, well, that's not because you are, a worse long-term option, but it's because you don't really fit what the app rewards in that moment. That's not a profile issue, but it is a context issue for sure. So keep that in mind as well. And I have the same issue if I'm swiping on women who are in their late 20s. I get fewer matches. If I, up the age from, let's say, 35 to 45, I get way more matches. So that also really depends on what you're looking for. Now, I get it if you say, well, I only want a woman between 25 and 30, for instance, then yeah, but you have to remember you will get fewer matches. And sure, it's unfair, but that is what it is. And fourth, you're on the wrong app for who you actually are. There are many different dating apps, and some dating apps work better in your area or work better for the profile you have. That just is the case. Not all dating apps attract the same women or men or even the same intentions. But most men treat them as interchangeable, which isn't the case. Some apps skew towards, novelty, and other ones, not novelty, I should say, and casual dating and constant movement. And others skew, older, slower, and more relationship oriented. So if you're calm, stable, and a very grounded guy using an app that rewards excitement and short-term engagement, your match rate will be low, even if women who would like you in real life are on that app. I have the same thing. For instance, on Tinder, I recognize and I have to acknowledge that there is way more casual dating going on when I'm someone who is calm and stable and more serious. But on a dating app, for instance, like Bumble or Hinge, I get better quality matches. So what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean you're boring per se. It means you're mismatched to the environment. So switch out the apps, try different dating apps. Dating apps are ecosystems, remember that. And being a good fish in the wrong pond still gets you nowhere, really. And fifth, a lot of men you see, a lot of women you see aren't actually available. It's true. It really is true. I get, let's say, 10 matches, and out of those 10 matches, 8 women aren't really there to date. They aren't really free to date. They don't really want to date. They're just hanging out on the app. So I get matches that go nowhere, for instance. And this is a quiet truth that nobody really wants to say out loud. A significant portion of men and women on dating apps aren't genuinely dating. They're recently, for instance, out of a relationship, they're emotionally unavailable, they're bored, or just curious to be on the app. They're just validating themselves. They're seeing what's out there. They swipe, they match, they chat, and they don't move things forward. I'll give you an example. 2 days ago, I matched with this woman. We were chatting a little bit, and I asked her, well, what are you looking for? Because I'm here for something serious. And well, she was really honest and she literally told me, well, I'm just here to chat and to validate myself because I'm a little bit bored and I don't feel really, pretty at the moment. So I'm like, okay, well, that's honest for once, but yeah, that's not what I'm looking for. And you don't hear that a lot from women, but that is actually the case. So it's nice to hear that from, someone, from a woman. And men experience this as rejection, while in reality, it's often non participation, really. You're interacting with a woman who is visible but not available. that really isn't a match. So even if you have a match, it doesn't really go anywhere. And apps do not distinguish between people who are ready to date and people who are just, well, present. So you end up measuring yourself against people, men and women, who were never in the game to begin with. So what does this mean? Well, putting it together. When you stack all of this up, something important becomes clear. Not getting matches does not automatically mean you're unattractive, undesirable, or you're doing something wrong. It often means you're dealing with location constraints, timing issues, comparison brackets, platform mismatches, and women who aren't actually available. Now, I'm not saying don't have a good profile. You should have a good profile. But there's more to getting matches than just having a good profile. And that's something that a lot of men often forget. None of none of this none of these mismatches or not getting matches is fixed by being bitter about women or being bitter about dating apps. None of that gets fixed by, thinking about yourself as maybe low value that you need to up your game and become this, quote unquote high value man. That's not what it is about. And none of this gets fixed by listening to this, rage content, if you will. Online dating is skewed. We know this. But not in a cartoon villain way people like to sell it to you. It's skewed in a quiet, structural way that doesn't really care about your intentions or your effort. Once you understand that, a lot of frustration stops turning inward or outward and it starts turning into perspective. So, before you decide online dating is a verdict of your worth, make sure you're not confusing context with character. Most men don't lose because they're bad options, not at all. They lose because they misread the environment they're operating in. And a bad diagnosis always leads to bad conclusions, that's for sure. So, hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.